Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, and good night to all of you out there, wherever you happen to be in the world. My name is Voice of Wind, and this is not a gaming stream today. We're going to be sewing. Let me bring up our camera. It wouldn't be Voice of Wind stream if we didn't have an error, right? At least we've got the chill music for the day. All right. So what are we doing today? Well, we're sewing, as I said. So it's going to be a relatively quick stream, all things considered. I want to go over a couple of basics. So I've thrifted a lot of clothing over the last, I don't want to say couple of months, because a lot of this stuff I bought pre-COVID, but I bought a lot of stuff at thrift stores that was between like $2 and $6. And why is it that kind of price? Well, it's because a lot of this stuff is either damaged a little bit, has a couple of little flaws, or, you know, it's too big or too small in certain places, or it needs a little bit of work. You know, it needs a little TLC. That's why it's at the quote-unquote cheaper end thrift stores, right? But it's still quality clothing. There's nothing wrong with it in the grand scheme of things. It's still able to be worn. It just needs a little bit of fixing, right? So we're going to look at fixing some belt loops real quick, and then we're going to fix a couple of hook and eye closures, some buttons, and then based on the time that we've got from there, I have a seamless bra from Victoria's Secret, but it could be from any place, right? Seamless bras are relatively universal at this point with the way that the bonding of the fabrics is done. That is starting to fall apart, but all of the components are still good. It's just the bonding, the seam that is not a seam, that's starting to fall apart. And so instead of just tossing it, why not fix it? Because bras are not cheap, at least good bras aren't, and there's no reason not to keep using it if we can fix it. And I don't know if we can fix it, but it's certainly worth a try. So we're going to try for that. So let's hop on in and we'll take a look at the materials that we need, and then we'll look at what we're trying to accomplish and go from there. So on to items that we need, right? We can't sew without having something to sew, and without having the items that we actually need to sew. So let's take a look at what we've got. As always, we have scissors. These scissors are fabric only. They will never be used for anything else. So if you're going to be cutting anything else today, you need to make sure that you're using a different pair of scissors. That's important, right? So other than that, we may or may not need some pins. So we've got those. I've got a fabric marker, my normal friction chalk marker. I have a feeling we won't need that, but we've got them just in case. I have my seam ripper. We will almost certainly need a seam ripper at some point today. Whether we make a mistake or not, we're going to be adjusting clothing, and that's going to mean ripping out the seams that the manufacturer put in. We'll also be adjusting buttons, so we're going to be taking them off. I also have a packet of hook and eye closures, so you can see those. One side is eyes and the other side is hooks, and you can pick these up at your local fabric store. They're super cheap. They're $2 to $3 for a pack of 10 of each. If you don't want to do that though, you probably have some hook and eyes on old pairs of bras or old clothing that you were going to donate or throw away. And instead of throwing all of it away, just cut off the end, keep the hooks, keep the eyes, because those are reusable even though the elastic is worn away, and you can just cut these out when you need them. So we've got a perfect little holder for them when we need them. So I always keep extras of things when I need them. We may need to swap sewing needles, so I have a set of universals and a set of stretch, depending on our fabric. as well as the tool for removing it from the machine, which for my machine is just a screwdriver. I have a set of tweezers, just in case I need to hold something, because we are working with very, very small components here, and I don't want my finger anywhere near a needle. So it will be important to have a nice long set of tweezers. The other secret tool that we're going to be using is a toothpick, and I'll get into why that's important later, but they are super, super useful for attaching buttons, and I'll show you why that's important a little later on. The very last thing that I've got for components is a set of sewing feet. Now, a lot of people are not going to have these, so you may have to just work with what you've got, but I picked this up off of eBay. These are a set of universal sewing feet. I want to say that it came out to right around $1 a foot, maybe $2 a foot, somewhere in there. So this was less than $30 for 15 sewing feet. And we're going to make use of at least one of these today. There's a foot in here that is called a button attachment foot. And so it's difficult to see unless we get really close there, but it's got little rubber feet that will hold a button in place, but it's also going to give us a lot of room to work with. So I'm going to make use of that today instead of having a big chunk of metal in the way of my working area. So we'll make use of that soon enough. But I highly recommend a kit like this, and the manufacturer is Big Teddy. So highly recommend it. Great little kit, under 30 bucks, and you will make use of these. Guarantee it. This is our first project. So this is a skirt that I picked up at a thrift store. I want to say I only spent like $2 on it, and it's in great shape, except for a couple of things. And they're minor things, but they prevent me from wearing it because I'm a little particular about my clothing. So the first and most obvious thing is that on the closure on the zipper, we have an eye for a closure, but we have no hook. So that's the first thing that we're going to deal with, right? I have a hook that I've pulled out of my kit. It's what we were just looking at. So I'm going to add the hook on with the eye so that we can get that back to working again. And the other thing that we're going to do with these is you can see that this skirt comes with its own little belt, right? And this belt is super, super thin. We could add our own belt to this very easily, right? It has a belt loop in it to kind of hold things. So we could add our own if we wanted to, or a different fabric to match with a different top. So, you know, this is something where if I had gone to the thrift store and just this belt was bad or starting to tatter and fray, this is easily something that we can toss out and make a new one of. However, it's in pretty good shape, so I'm not worried about that. What I am worried about is these belt loops, right? So, as you can see, this belt loop looks really, really nice when the camera is kind of flat on it there, which is how I would like the belt loop to always look. But if I turn this just a little bit, look at how wide that belt loop is. I mean, it really comes quite a ways away from the fabric. Why do I need such a large belt loop for a belt that's included that clearly fits nice and flush to the fabric? I have a problem with that. And so you can see what I've done already is I've ironed it. That's why there's this nice crease here. And if I lay this belt loop flat along here, you'll see that there's still plenty of room for the belt to fit in here. Once it lies flat, I can hold my thumbs along it to keep it flat, and the belt is still going to move through here just fine, right? So what I'm gonna do on all of the belt loops on this skirt, and I think there's only two, is I've ironed them so that they will lay nice and flat I'm going to pin it down, and I'm going to run a stitch right along this top edge. That's going to secure this belt loop down. It's going to keep it nice and flush, and it's going to make a much, much nicer look than having this belt loop that sticks way, way out on this skirt. And that keeps this nice, flat, professional look on what I would really like to wear it at work, you know? It's a business style looking skirt, nice little pinstripe. It's got some nice little pleating in it, but gosh, I hate it when things like this aren't thought about. Why would you have this sticking out when the rest of it is so clean and fresh, right? So we're going to take care of that very, very quickly. So what else could we do with this belt loop if it was, say, torn or ripped, or we wanted to clean it up even more than this, right? Well, just like with the fabric for the belt, this fabric here doesn't have to match the belt loop, right? So if one of these belt loops was falling apart, we could replace it with a different fabric. We could replace it with a gray to match. We could find a pinstripe to match. You could even take a tie, like a men's business tie, and use that fabric. Just cut a strip and put that on as a belt loop. And I think that that would be amazing. It would make this stick out really, really nicely. And then you could use a tie for a belt. And that would stand out really, really nicely. It would be so cool against this gray background with a very, very clean top that was a bold, solid color. And it wouldn't detract from the look of the skirt at all. So there's a lot of options that you can do with buttonholes, or with belt loops, but I think that having them stick out, probably not the best idea for a skirt that's supposed to lie pretty flush, right? So I'm going to take care of that real quickly. This will take all of 2 minutes to do. Just going to push it down, pin it, sew it. We may not even need to pin it. I can probably just press with a thumb and hold it there and sew it. But first, I am going to take the belt out just so it's out of the way. Is the sewing machine soothing? I don't know about that. Alright, so we've gone ahead and sewn our belt loops down. So we'll take a look at those now. So before, just a few minutes ago, they did not lie flush with this at all. So we've made a nice line here. You can see that. This is not going to be noticeable at all once you've got a blouse on with it. And now, from the side, there's no real gaping at all once this is flush against the body, right? So now we still have the fabric from the belt loop itself, which means that if you didn't like what you had done, you could always reverse that. But I think that this is a much cleaner look, right? And again, if you wanted to switch out this belt that was included with it, I think that you could go with a different fabric and create another belt with these belt loops, maybe even swap the belt loops for something else, and you could really make this skirt special. So the other thing we want to add is the hook and eye closure. So again, I purchased this at the thrift store, and it was only a couple of dollars, and we've got an eye, but no hook. So we're going to take care of that very, very quickly. And the easiest way to line these up, and I know it's hard to see on camera, so I'll get there in just a second, but I'm going to take out the belt again, and I'm going to take the zipper up to just below the eye. And then I'm going to take the hook that we're going to put in, and I'm going to figure out the orientation for it. I'm going to place it through the eye, and then I'm going to hold it to where I need it to be. So let me see if I can get this up to the camera. So I'm using just a little bit of pressure with my index finger to hold the hook in place. The zipper is providing the friction on exactly where it'll be when it's on. And now I want to take a look at where it will fit on the fabric on the other side. And hopefully you can see that there's a seam line that runs across the top on this side. I'm going to match it up with the top and the bottom of the openings for the thread right there. Now, I can hand sew this, right? It's entirely possible to hand sew this, and it would fit just fine, but why hand sew it if I can machine sew it? So I'm going to sew this so that the holes for the hook are just behind the zipper and match up with that line. Yes, you can see the holes where it was originally stitched in, and I think that the original holes were just a little bit too far back, to be perfectly honest. So I think that's probably why it fell off to begin with. The original hook was too far back and the zipper wouldn't come all the way up, and so it probably got bent out of shape by pulling the zipper up too hard and having the hook pull against it. So that tension as it came up probably pulled the hook off. And that's why someone said, you know what, I don't want to deal with this, and gave it away to a thrift store. And while that is wasteful, I will happily take your skirt off your hands, spend 10 minutes to fix it, and turn it into my own skirt. Thank you very much. So for this, like I said, I'm gonna switch feet. We have a kit of feet that I picked up on eBay for under $30 that has 15 feet, so $2 a foot. So in it is this, what is called a buttonhole foot, or a button foot. This light blue coloring on it. These feet are actually rubberized, and they're specifically made for holding a button down on clothing. But what it's going to do for us is it's going to allow the needle to go between these 2 feet where the hook is coming out without being in the way. There won't be any metal that's going to get in the way of holding that hook down while it still holds the fabric down, right? I want the fabric to be stationary, so that's how we're going to use this foot. So I've got our little button foot on now, and it's really, really difficult to try to pin on these hooks. Right, we're prudes, my goodness. So with this hook on, like I said before, I've got this set of tweezers. I'm going to use the tweezers to hold it in place so that I don't actually accidentally catch my hand in a needle. And I'm going to use this buttonhole foot and turn off the feed dogs on my machine. So the feed dogs are the panel underneath the metal plate. So there's a metal plate underneath here. And under that metal plate, there's a foot that comes underneath, grabs the fabric and pulls it forward. Comes underneath, grabs the fabric, pulls it forward, right? And so that's how the fabric actually moves. There's little feet underneath that are pulling it forward a little bit at a time. There's a lever on my machine back here to drop them out so that they no longer move with the fabric. So that stops that action. And I don't want the fabric to move while it's in here. So that's what I'm doing there. And now I'm gonna set this in place. And I'm gonna use that buttonhole foot, or the button foot again. Not the buttonholer, but the button foot, just as a way to help me hold this fabric in place. So it's literally just a piece of rubber that's pushing it down, holding it in place. And now, to hold this hook in place, I'm going to use tweezers because I don't want to get pierced by a sewing machine needle. At least not today. It doesn't sound like fun. And for the actual sewing, we're going to use a zigzag stitch. So the same way that you would use a zigzag for the edge of fabric or for stretch fabric, we're going to switch to that zigzag stitch. And when we set that up, there are width options on that zigzag stitch, so you can set the width. And on my machine, it always sets up the right-hand side first. So I'm going to set up the needle for the right-hand side of this hook, this opening on the right-hand side. Let me get a little closer. So I'm going to set up the needle for this right-hand side, and then I'm going to set the width so that when it comes to the left, it pops over to about the middle of the left-hand side, so that the needle will just bounce back and forth between the two. And I'll just zigzag a couple of times. I'll move it a little forwards, a little backwards, so that I can be not in the exact same spot all the time, because I don't want the thread to catch itself. And we'll just get a couple of stitches in there so it'll stay in place, right? So we'll throw that in real quick. I'll see you in about 30 seconds. So that took a little longer than I expected because I've never used this foot before. So it's a little bit of a learning curve to get that to work. Let me show you how that turned out, because I'm pretty happy with that. I'm a huge fan of this foot. So on the back side, we got a little bit of a loop just because I spent too long in one spot. So this is that catching that I was talking about. So try to avoid that, but I'm happy with that. No one's going to notice that. We've got a little bit of string left over, so I'm going to tie those ends off before I cut them. That'll help it from fraying. On the inside, though, this is where it really matters, right? So you can see, hopefully, if I can center, there we go. You can see that I did a set of stitches up near the hook itself, a set of stitches towards the back of the hook, and a set of stitches past the hook. And that keeps this from doing any sort of wobbling, right? So I've reinforced it by reinforcing past the fabric and reinforcing it several states inside of the hook. So it's not just one or two stitches, it's a bunch of stitches in a bunch of different places to help reinforce it, similar to the way a button is done. So I'm really happy with that. And now if we take the eye, hook it in, and then zip up, let's see how it looks. So exactly what we would expect. The zipper doesn't come quite all the way up with them hooked in, which is the problem that probably caused it to detach before, but it looks really, really nice with it all connected in. So we'll tie off the threads for this a little bit later and then cut them, but I'm happy with the way that this all turned out. So let's do our next project. So I know you're going to be shocked and absolutely surprised. This is another skirt that I picked up at a thrift store for around $2 to $4. And I absolutely love this material. It's a poly cotton blend. And it sounds kind of like raincoat material. It's a very, very strange sound to it, but it feels fantastic. But, of course, there was a problem with it when I bought it. The hook that was attached to it when I bought it was absolutely mangled. When I purchased it, the hook that was attached to it looked like a paperclip coming off of it. It was just absolutely coiled all the way out to the side. No one was going to buy this thing. So you can see I have removed the hook from it, and the eye still exists. I don't know why it is, but at thrift stores, all the hooks are mangled, all the eyes are in great shape. So I have tons of eyes sitting around with no hooks for them. So again, we're going to do the same thing. This is where the eyes, or the hook used to be. I'm going to take out the thread that's there. I can't just pick it out with my fingers. So I'm going to use my thread ripper. I'm going to pull it out. I'm going to set a new one in. And we'll be done with this skirt, because other than that, there is nothing wrong with it. I've checked all of the other seams. They're serged nicely at the bottom to give this tiered effect on it. I can't find anything wrong with that. The inside is nicely finished with this little French seam here. It's in really great shape. So all I really need to do is just another hook. So we're going to do that real quick, and then we'll move on to the next project. One of the other issues that I have with this skirt that we will eventually come back to is no pocket. And this skirt is meant to lie flat, and I know it's supposed to lie flat, but it really needs one. And the zipper on the left-hand side makes it near impossible to get a pocket on that side because, of course, the zipper's going to get in the way of that. But I don't see any reason why we can't get a pocket onto the right-hand side of it. So that'll be a project for a different day. The previous skirt we were just looking at, because of all of the pleating and the work inside of it, I don't see it as feasible to fit a pocket into it at this point without absolutely taking the whole thing apart and kind of rebuilding it from scratch, which I'm not quite ready to do with that one just yet. So that one we're going to leave alone. But this one, I think for sure we can fit a pocket into. Because on the inside of this one over here, they literally just sewed the sides in, right? So this is just the two sides sewn together. We could absolutely undo this single seam right here, find a nice black fabric or even a white one, and sew a pocket in on one side. And that would be far better than no pockets, right? So we'll do that. So I think we're going to have to place this hook at about the same spot, but I want to do the same thing. I'm going to zip it up and look at the placement. This zip is a little bit cantankerous. That's going to be our word for the day. So we'll move that hook as far as we can out. Or move the eye out, I should say. Slide the hook in, if we can. Maybe this one was just never meant to have a hook and eye closure. My goodness, it's tight. Okay. There we go. So again, with the hook in the eye, we'll just make sure that it reaches across. And again, I think that the last hook was put just too far. It doesn't need to be that far in because you cause an issue with the zipper otherwise. So I think I'm going to put it right at the edge of the white fabric here. So right at the edge of the white fabric, and I'm going to line it up with the very top of the black seam. So that looks pretty good to me. So we'll throw that in, lock it down, and we'll be done. And then we'll move on to the next one, which is going to be replacing buttons, or at least redoing buttons. And again, I'm going to use my big tweezers because I don't want to catch any fingers under a needle. It just does not sound like a good time to me. I am hand turning this because I want to make sure I don't have the needle going through anything that it shouldn't be going through. So this is just a little extra precaution. And now that I've gotten a few loops into it, I can let go with the tweezers. And I'm going to move it just a little bit so that we can make sure that we're hitting multiple points in the fabric, just like we did before. And I'm pretty sure that I'm going through plastic in the zipper, and that's why I'm having such a difficult time here. And that's okay. To a different spot. Outside of the hook, so we can make sure that we get decent coverage all the way around. And it's okay if it's a little loose. It's not okay if it's all over the place. You know what I mean? So because of how thick this fabric is, we're a little looser this time around. But again, you really can't see any of it on the side where it matters. And on the inside, the hook has a little bit of a wobble, but I think that that's okay. It's not going to go anywhere with all of that thread holding it in place. We'll give all of this a little bit of a tie down later before cutting it so it doesn't unravel. Just give all of it a gentle tug now. And then we'll get this zip up and take a look at how we did. So with the hook and eye on and the zip up, that looks pretty good. Nice and clean on both sides. And I think the zip will actually go all the way up. Very nice. So I shouldn't have any issues with that in the future. Alright, so second to last project, we're going to take a look at redoing buttons. And this is where our secret tool, the toothpick, is going to come in handy. Alright, so these, I don't remember if these were thrift store buy or not. I don't think it matters. And I don't think that they were. And in fact, they still have the thread from where the tag was, because I'm one of those people that doesn't ever remove anything, ever. So let's do that now. My goodness, I feel like a heathen. Okay. Now it doesn't look like they were just purchased. My goodness. Okay. So, on these buttons are just about as wobbly as they can be at this point. And I think if you gave them a rough enough tug, they would probably just fall right off. And so they need to be reattached. And that's both of them. And it's got two of them here. And I love this pair of pants. There's nothing else that's really wrong about them. They've got pockets everywhere, which they should, because we love good pockets. And so, just real quickly, I'm going to take these buttons off, and then we're going to discuss how we put them back on, because we have a secret for reattaching buttons that I'll go into in just a moment. Yeah, this thread was not long for the world. It took just the gentlest of tugs on it, and it was gone. Okay, so, reattaching buttons. Normally, I would go and get a matching color for these buttons. However, if someone is looking that closely at the thread that is holding my buttons on my jeans, I think that there's a bigger problem. And so I think that having a black holding them against a purple fabric is probably going to be just fine instead of the original silver that was there. I don't think anyone's going to notice. So, what is the important thing to know about buttons? Right? They might be just a little bit too close. So, most buttons have a concave side, which is the side that faces out, and a convex side, which is the side where they attach. And the reason that they have that shape to them is so that they kind of scoop into the buttonhole, right? And that makes them easier to put on and take off. So that's the reason for this kind of hollowing shape. Now, when we put them on our fabric, most people, if they have not put on buttons before, will naively just sew them onto the fabric. And they'll sew them tightly, right? And if you sew it too tightly, you have to remember that you're going to be sewing in such a way that this button goes through the buttonhole, and it's really holding two pieces of fabric, right? So you have to account for the distance between the button and the layer of fabric it's holding. So we need to account for that distance that you're going to have, right? So we want to have the button sit a little ways away from the fabric itself. So how do we achieve that without setting the fabric on top and sewing, because we might actually accidentally sew both of the pieces of fabric together? Well, the trick that I've learned to use is a toothpick, right? A toothpick is nice and rigid, and it's not too thick. And if we hold it up against the fabric here, it's a little bit thicker than the fabric itself. Hopefully you can see that, right? So the width of the toothpick is a little bit wider than the width of the fabric. And so I use sew a lot when I'm sewing, I've noticed. All right, so if I hold a toothpick up against the fabric and then sew the button on with that toothpick in between the button and the fabric, then I'll have the perfect distance between those stitches. So that's how I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to put a toothpick down, then the button on top, and then I'm going to sew it. Right? So let's do that. And this is where that set of tweezers again comes in handy really, really nicely. And again, we're going to use that zigzag stitch. And I'm going to use the holes that already exist as my guide. So setting the toothpick in, then setting the button on top. And this button foot is going to provide even pressure on both sides of the toothpick to hold the button in place. And the other reason I'm using a toothpick is that it's a piece of wood, right? So if the needle does happen to hit the toothpick, it won't damage the needle. It'll damage the toothpick first. And that's super important. I'd rather damage a toothpick than a needle. Just trying to get things lined up here. It's amazingly difficult to get 3 things lined up with just 2 hands. And really just 2 fingers. Let's use these tweezers. So I'm going to bring the needle part way down, and I'm going to adjust the button until everything lines up. I'm going to do a couple across, then give a gentle tug on my strings to kind of lock what's going on in front and back. And then I need to move this whole apparatus forward a little bit. Or backwards, depending on which holes you went into first. And then we'll go through the next set, right? So this buttonhole set is 2x2. And then we'll step it backwards again and go through your initial set a couple of times. And then once more through that second set. And even though I'm hand cranking this is much, much faster than doing it all by hand. I have a little bit of a catch on the back of this. We'll take a look at that. There's not much I can do about it currently. You could redo this if you want to, but I'm not sure if it's really worth it. So just give everything a gentle tug. That seems to have fixed it. Very nice. Okay, so let's take a look. And then we'll do the second button. Oh, very cool, miss. So you can see now it's holding that toothpick in place. And again, we use that toothpick because it's simulating the fabric that's going to be underneath. So I sewed right around the toothpick. So we're going to need to get that toothpick out. We're just going to give a gentle pull to get it out. But I want you to see that we went ahead and did these top two towards the front of the toothpick a couple of times, then moved and did these back two, then moved, did the front two, then moved, did the back two, just a couple of times each. You can see the back is nice and clean as well. We will tie off the threads after giving them a gentle tug on each side, cut them. And so we'll remove the toothpick now. And then we can check to make sure that we can still get that button through the hole without issue. And plenty of room to get it in there, right? It's nice and loose, but that button is now on there firmly. It's not going anywhere. So I'm going to do the other button, and we'll be done with these, and we'll move on to the next project, which is going to be the one that I don't know if it's going to work. And it's okay to experiment. All right, let's hop on this second button real quick. And then we're going to take on the mystery project. The mystery project being, I don't know if I can fix a bra, but we're going to find out. So we've been going for just over an hour now, and we've fixed 3 garments, which isn't too bad. I'm happy with that. For less than $4-5 for an outfit from a thrift store, you can make just a couple of modifications, make it your own, and have something that no one else will have fixed up just for you. And think, someone threw it away. So I'm using the previous holes that are here as my guide. The previous holes actually have these buttons overlap a little bit, which I don't really like. So I think I'm going to move this button down just a bit so that they don't quite overlap. It's one of the things I didn't like about these when I purchased them. And I think we'll still be okay if they don't overlap. I'll take that chance. Getting everything lined up here is painful, but we'll get there. I think I'm locked in now. just a couple of stitches to get everything locked in. And then I want a gentle tug front and back, just to make sure. Go. Move it forward so that we can hit the next set of holes. And then again, move it back. That knock you just heard was me hitting the toothpick. So the toothpick's going to have some notches in it, which is good. I'm much happier now that I know I've saved a needle by using a little tiny chunk of wood to protect my machine. All right, there is our other button. Again, I'll give the back a gentle tug. Same with the front. Wonderful. So now we've got both buttons set up. I'll pull that toothpick out. And you can kind of see a couple of little dents in it. So our needle did hit it. Perfectly fine with that. And these buttons are now no longer overlapping. And they're still lined up enough for us to use. And they're now nice and solidly attached and ready to go. So we'll tie off the threads later, cut them off, and we're good to go. All right, so last project is going to be the doozy of a project. All right, so I don't know if this one's going to work. Heat bonded bra, right? I've had this for, let's just say, a long, long time now. And it's one of those seamless molded cup style bras from Victoria's Secret, but it could be from anyone, right? There's no seams in it anywhere. And there's adhesive on it that keeps it all together nice and clean. And this was gifted to me. I didn't purchase it. I don't support Victoria's Secret for reasons that we could get into, but this is not a political stream. But suffice it to say, I really actually do like this bra, even if I don't support the company. But it started to fall apart. And it started to fall apart specifically at the edge of this cup pad here. So if I can get the light on it, you can see here that it's falling apart, right? And it was just held together with these little strips of heat bond glue. Well, I don't think that I can get that to heat bond again, at least not in a way that's going to be nice. So I'm just going to sew a very quick seam along the top of the cup pads, right? And I'm going to do the same thing on the other side, because if it's happening on one side, it's probably going to happen on the other side too. The rest of it is holding together really well, and I think that there is a seam at the very bottom of the cups that's holding the wire in. So I'm fine with that. But the top of the cup pads definitely needs some work. And I think if I put a very, very tiny little seam in there, not only will no one notice, but it'll make this last for a lot longer. So I'm going to put a couple of pins into here just to get everything lined back up again where it was. But I'm going to sew the entire length of the cup. And I'm going to see how that looks afterwards. Now, this is a form-fit foam. So it is stretch. So I'm going to need to switch my needle. And I'm going to need to switch my foot. And I'm going to need to make sure that the feed dogs are moving again. So we're going to take care of all of that as well. But let me pin first. So I'm going to start by pinning right up at the top. And there's kind of this overlap where the strap attaches. And the strap isn't holding together too great either. So I might just do a quick zigzag stitch across the strap just to hold these edges in as well. I think I am going to do that. So we'll take care of all of that as part of the same process. So let me get this lined up. Put a quick pin in it. It doesn't quite want to line up like that. Maybe like this. I'm trying to get it set up exactly the way it was before, so that the place where it was heat bonded doesn't show. The problem is this was all stretched before. So if it was stretched before to get that heat bond in place, I think I have to give it a little bit of a stretch again. How does it feel on this side? So it's nice and smooth on the inside of the cup, and the attachment for the strap is on the outside of the cup. So I want to do the same thing here. So I can feel the attachment for the outside of the cup. Let's get the pin in on the bottom. And then just a little bit of a stretch for the top. That should work. Cool. So that's going to hold that in place. The rest of it feels like it's holding together pretty good. And I'm going to use a very, very small zigzag stitch for this. And we need to switch the needle. So this is stretch fabric, so I'm going to use stretch needles. And these needles are all the same size, so you can see it says stretch needle. So those are what I'm using. You'll notice the one on the right-hand side, I'm not sure if it's right or left in your view, has a blue stripe on it, and the others have a little bit of a yellow stripe. That blue one is denim, so I have it in the wrong place, and that's bad. Sometimes I'm a bad sewist too, but try to keep your sewing needles in the places where they should be. So always consult the charts for your sewing needles if you don't keep them in place. But yellow is stretch, blue is denim. I don't know why, other than denim is blue jeans. That's how I remember that blue is denim. I don't have a way to remember that yellow is stretch, but it's important that you know which needles are which. I'm just going to swap my needle real quick. All right, let's give this a shot. Again, I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to give it a shot. So I'm going to go from the top of the cup across and then from the top of the cup down, because I want to reinforce the top of this seam. Now, one of the tricks to sewing these curves like this is you have to maintain the curve. So I'm actually holding the cup up, and I'm going to rotate the entire cup with the sewing machine so that we can maintain this curve all the way through. Need the feed dogs up, because it's not going to move forward if they're not up. My sewing machine does not like this foam at all. The housing for my I forget the name of it. It doesn't matter. Pretty much the entire housing up the bottom came out. So we're gonna cut that thread. We're gonna reseat everything, and we're gonna try this again. It also did not start all that pretty, so I'm gonna clean up some of the top of that. No one's ever going to see this. I mean, this is not a date bra. At least, I wouldn't consider it a date bra. Luckily, it doesn't look like anything was damaged. So I'm going to reseat all of this, and we'll try it one more time. Yeah, the components inside are still working. I just need to get these pieces lined up, and I'm going to need the manual for that. Yep. So I'm going to need to find a smaller screwdriver to get into this. This really doesn't have anything to do with the bra itself. This has to do with my machine not liking the fabric, and there is a way to align this component piece underneath for the bobbin to fit, but I don't have that manual handy, so I'm going to go and look that up, and we will finish this bra the next time we come back, because I don't quite like the way that this seam came out. So we'll have some work for next time. So we'll take care of that. I'll take a look at my machine and getting it reset so that everything works nicely, and I'll discuss the intricacies of that the next time we do a sewing stream, because I actually do want to get this bra fixed. It's a nice bra, like I said. So let me bring all of this back up. There we go. All right, so we actually did get quite a bit done today. We took care of the hook and eye closure on a skirt. We took care of the hook and eye closure on a skirt and some belt loops. Thank you for focusing. So I'm very pleased with that. This was the main reason for the stream. And on a pair of pants, we had some buttons that we noticed were coming loose, and so we went ahead and took care of those. So these are now good to go, ready to wear, and we just need to clean up the strings that we've got on those. And that's literally just going to be tying a square knot, cutting them off. So I hope that you're taking care of yourselves. I hope that you are hydrating and staying healthy. I hope that you are breathing through the jump scares that life throws your way. And I hope that you all have a wonderful afternoon, evening, morning, or night. Whatever it happens to be, wherever you are in the world.